A knife gleamed in the boy's trembling hand, moonlight carving shadows across a crumbling barn. Sam Whitaker pressed the blade's tip against his sister's cheek. Barely a whisper of steel, but it was all the promise he needed. Lila's small body huddled against hay, eyes wide as winter's hush. Snow sifted through broken boards, each flake a silent witness to their fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Elias Kane rode through pines whispered white by moonlight, Winchester slung at his side. He guided his mare across frost-hardened earth, coat dusted in last night's storm. He carried grief in every strand of his beard. Gracie's laughter stolen by fever, their unborn child lost in her final breath. Since then, only the wind had heard his vows. He paused at the barn's threshold. Timber sagged under snow's weight. A soft cry drifted through broken boards. Elias dismounted, spurs clicking on frozen ground. He crossed to the door and raised his lantern. Light danced on hay and shadow, revealing two small figures, a boy, knife in hand, and a girl clutching a tarnished silver locket at her throat. Sam lowered the blade in trembling relief. He pressed Lila's hand to her chest, shawl bunched beneath her chin. "Stay back," he whispered, voice clipped by terror. His small frame trembled under patched coat, each breath a promise to protect her. Lila pressed the locket's oval shape to her palm, her last link to their mother. Elias set down his lantern on an overturned feed sack and crouched beside them. He eased his hands from his coat pockets. "Easy now," he said, voice rough as canyon rock. He placed a tin cup of hot water on a crate and unfolded a wool blanket. The boy's knife arm quivered. The knife's blade caught lantern light like starlight on ice. Sarah's locket, no, Lila's, clinked beneath her hand. Elias saw the initials SW etched in cursive. He knelt and draped the blanket over hay-strewn boards. The girl's small eyes locked on his face, curious and frightened. Sam's gaze darted between Elias and the blade. Elias held out the blanket, silent offer of warmth and mercy. Sam hesitated. Snow drifted to the barn's hole-riddled roof, each flake cold as memory. He pressed the knife's hilt to the hay and slid to his knees, protecting Lila's back as he crawled beneath the blanket's wool. Elias closed the distance and tucked the girl's shoulders into fleece. He wrapped the blanket around Sam's arms, chimney heat blooming beneath wool. Elias lifted Maggie, or no, Lila, and Sam scrambled his feet. Elias gathered them both, 10 cups of warm stew in his palms. He offered the girl first. She sipped, eyes widening at broth's promise. Sam took his cup in both hands, trembling as warmth spread through his chest. Lila's locket dangled beneath her shawl. Elias caught the glint of brass as the girl twisted the chain in small fingers. He nodded at Sam. "Come on," he said, voice softer than wind whisper over snow. "My cabin's not far." Sam's knife remained at his side, but he nodded. Protecting his sister had been his only choice. Now he chose safety. They trudged across pines draped in frost. Lila pressed close to Elias's coat, each lantern beam a path through the drifts. Sam's boots sank in cold powder. He glanced back, half expecting a pursuer's shadow. None came, only moonlight's vigil. At Elias's cabin, logs gleamed under lantern glow. Smoke curled from the chimney like prayer. Elias set Sam and Lila inside, closing the door against Gale's return. He scattered kindling in the hearth's cradle and struck flint. A spark blossomed into flame. Warmth rushed through the cabin's narrow boards. Lila knelt on a straw pallet beside the hearth, locket pressed between her most trusted fingers. Sam paced the dirt floor, knife drawn. Elias fetched 2 tin bowls of stew and set them before the children. He touched Sam's shoulder, then stepped back, silent guard at hearth's edge. Sam crouched, spoon shaking. He pressed the knife's hilt into the dirt, each breath steadying as stew's heat bloomed beneath his ribs. Lila wrapped her shawl tighter, eyes bright with hunger and relief. Elias poured water from his canteen into a basin and fetched clean cloth. He knelt to Sam's side and wiped grime from a boy's cheek. Each motion was careful faith. No leap of words, only the hush of care. Sam closed his eyes as cloth brushed cold dust from lashes. Outside, hoofbeats rumbled the earth, faint but certain. Elias rose, hand drifting to Winchester's grip. Sam's chest tightened. Lila pressed her face into the blanket's nap. Elias crossed to the shuttered window, pried it open, and peered into pines carved by moonlight. No rider appeared, only swirling drifts. He returned and placed his jacket across the children's shoulders, his coat still warm from his chest. Sam looked up, eyes reflecting lantern's glow. Elias knelt and wrapped Sam in the coat's heavy wool. They met in silence, blade laid aside in exchange for truss fabric. Sarah's locket glimmered in Lila's small hand. Elias reached and touched its brass edge, etched initials like soft echo. He hoisted Lila into his arms and pressed her to his shoulder. Sam slipped behind him, hand curled into coat's fold. Elias settled them before the hearth, each a pulse of chosen family against night's hunger. He moved the door and opened it. Snowed-in hoofprints curved toward the barn, fresh and wary. Elias closed the door and bolted it, each thunk a vow. The wind whined through cracks. Lanterns flickered in crowded gloom. Elias fetched blankets and piled them over the children's pallet. He knelt by Sam's side, spoon stew into the boy's mouth. No questions, only promise. Sam's lips closed around broth, each swallow a measure faith. Lila drifted asleep beneath Elias's coat, locket clutched in mittened hand. He stood and stacked more wood on embers, sparks drifting like memory. He pressed his palm to the stove's iron flank, warmth echoing across his chest. He closed his eyes and remembered Clara's last lullaby, each note a vow unkept until now. Before sleep stole them all, Elias stepped outside into blizzard's hush. He swept drift from the cabin's threshold and peered into swirling pines. The rider's outline melted into wind's drift. Snow-plastered tracks led away, as if the pursuer circled back through night's veil. Elias closed the door and latched it tight. He laid his coat across Lila's blankets, then draped it across Sam's shoulders. 2 children cloaked his loss and mercy. He kneeled and placed a thick wool hat on Lila's head, then on Sam's. Each gesture was silent covenant. Under this roof, no harm would come. At midnight, lanterns glowed like captured stars. The cabin exhaled its shelter. Straw mattress piled in corners, tin cups empty on the table, the hearth's embers crackling with promise. Elias stood sentinel by the stove, gun cocked in hand, heart tethered to loss and hope. Outside, the wind blasted through pines, hollow and hungry. In the hush before dawn's reckoning, the valley held its breath. Tomorrow would bring pursuit or peace, and only chosen families bond to carry them through Part Two's forging of trust and the hunter's return. Hoofprints circled the cabin's frost-hard earth, a hunter's vow etched in Wyoming's dawn. Elias Kane broke ice in the trough and knelt beneath the porch, water sloshing against his boots. Inside, Sarah Monroe stirred beneath blankets by the hearth's crackling glow. Sam Whitaker stood at the door, knife tucked behind his back like a penitent's prayer. Elias rose and lifted a bundle of kindling, each birch stick a promise of warmth and refuge. Elias split the first log with practiced swing, axe biting through bark in whispered rhythm. Snow-dusted beams sheltered the hearth's ember. Each strike of steel sparked memory of Clara's laugh before fever stole her breath. He stacked kindling in herringbone pattern and coaxed flame from flint and tinder. The hearth blazed alife, lantern light pooling on cedar planks. Sam edged closer, eyes wide with cautious trust. Elias stepped back, offering space and silence. "Let me," Sam murmured, fingers aching to help. He grasped the small axe Elias handed him, its handle worn smooth by frontier hands. Sam planted paws afoot, lifted the axe high, and brought it down. Splinterwood flew like fallen leaves. Elias nodded, mounting another log. No words passed. Trust had found them in flame's hush and shared labor. Lila hummed softly on her pallet, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She clutched the silver locket, SW etched in looping scrawl against her chest. Each hum was a stitch in the fragile tapestry of new beginnings. Sarah rose and gathered torn cloth from her pocket, knotting it around her side wound. Elias fetched needle and thread. Each stitch closed ragged linen and sealed her confidence in this hearth. She pressed the locket into Elias's hand. Inside lay a folded scrap of paper. Martha Cole, witness to Thomas Whitaker's final claim, June 1878. Elias traced the name with finger. Martha Cole, the widow down the lane, old frontier justice who'd known the Whitakers. He tucked the note into his vest, hope glinting like sunrise on steel. Mid-morning light dappled the snow-crusted corral as Elias led Sam and Lila outside. He showed Sam how to check a predator snare. Each trap a silent sentinel against night's hunger. Sam knelt in frost-chipped boots and examined wire loops for fresh tracks. Elias guided his hands, fist-sized and unsteady, steadying them until Sam's own heartbeat matched the land's rhythm. Lila watched from the porch, shawl dragging through snow, eyes bright as thawing ice. Back inside, Elias stirred pemmican stew in battered pot. The scent of dried meat and juniper soothed ragged nerves. He ladled thick broth into tin cups. Sam and Lila sipped in silence, warmth blooming like wildflowers in winter's heart. Sarah pressed her hand to the cup's rim, each sip a benediction against the storm's memory. Elias's eyes turned to the window, where drifted snow-whispered pursuers circling close. That afternoon, Martha Cole arrived on a gray mare, canteen strapped to saddle horn. Her shawl was streaked in snow, her eyes bright with purpose. She carried burlap sacks of flour and dried apples. Behind her trailed Amos Reed, the preacher who'd witnessed the Whitaker deed, Bible strapped to satchel. Reed's voice was low as pine bark. Holt's men scoured flats. He claims the children were sold to cover their parents' debts. He'll strike at first light. Reed laid his Bible on the table, his witness to truth against Gideon Holt's lies. Lila pressed a locket to Martha's hand. The widow's eyes shimmered. She clasped the girl's shoulder. "We stand with you," she whispered, voice steady as steeple bell. Sam watched, chest tight, as frontier justice knelt beside him. Community's hand reached through winter's chill. The children nodded, small faces set in resolve. Elias offered Martha a tin cup of pine bark tea, bitter warmth pressed between calloused palms. Reed blessed the hearth's flame with a single nod. Elias watched the preacher's hand drift to the Bible's binding. Quiet faith he'd once known, now gratefully reclaimed. Outside, a branch snapped beneath heavy snow. Sam froze, knife at ready. Reed and Martha exchanged glances. Each hoofbeat in distance carried Gideon Holt's name. Holt had once been land broker, now turned hunter, vengeance's currency. Elias steeled himself. This hearth would not fall to greed's flame. At dusk, Elias lit lanterns along the porch and scattered fresh kindling by the stove. Sam fetched water from the melting trough. Lila draped the locket's chain around her neck, shawl slipping to reveal initials glowing like promise. Elias placed his coat across her shoulders, his wife's coat, still warm from his chest. Maggie, no, Lila. Smile behind wool, each fold of refuge woven in loss and mercy. Before midnight, a warning sign emerged. A birch sapling to cabin's corner was carved with single slash, Holt's mark, the same symbol he branded on Whitaker's ranch years ago. Reed's Bible fell from the table. Martha trembled. Elias retrieved the carving and pressed it to his palm, with grain cold and carved in threat. Sam's jaw clenched. Lila's hand gripped the locket's base. Elias covered both children with the blanket from his bunk, tucking them in against winter's final assault. No words passed. Each heartbeat was a vow to stand guard. Outside, Gideon Holt's silhouette lingered among pines, rifle slung, cloak flaring in moonlight. He paused at the cabin door, breath frost-laced, and raised his hand as if to knock. Then he vanished into drifted night. Spurs clicking retreat's promise. Elias bolted the door and leaned against its crossbeam, each plank a fragment of newfound hope. He gathered Sam's knife from the pallet and traced its edge to Sam's trembling hand. Storm-forged trust passed from one protector to another. Sarah woke and pressed her forehead to Elias's chest, hesitant gratitude woven in breath. Lila stirred and reached for the locket, small fingers threading brass chain. Reed and Martha held their lanterns in silent vigil. In the hush before dawn's reckoning, the cabin exhaled its shelter. Hearth embers winked like stars trapped in stone. Pines whispered as if mourning spent. Elias knelt and wrapped the blanket's edge around Sam's shoulders once more, trusted covenant beneath winter's final veil. Sam closed his eyes, blade sheet beside him, and trusted the dawn's promise. Together they would face Gideon Holt's return in part three's pursuit, and only chosen family's bond could carry them through. A carved mark bled sap from a birch. Gideon Holt's vow haunting Ash Creek's dawn. Elias Kane knelt in frost-crusted meadow, eyes tracing the deep slash, 3 inches long, bleeding pale amber. Each droplet whispered violence under pine's hush. He glanced toward his cabin. Shutters unlatched, windows boarded, traps glinting in drifted light. Holt's silhouette had vanished into pines hours ago, but the threat lingered like winter's breath. Sam Whitaker emerged from the cabin, blanket wrapped tight around his shoulders. His small boots crunched over frost, eyes fixed on the birch's wound. He carried a coil of trap, wire Elias had taught him to bend. Elias rose and nodded. "Help me finish." His voice was low as canyon floor. Sam pressed a locket's brass rim beneath his coat. Martha Cole's name pressed close to his heart. He knelt beside Elias and looped wire around branches to secure boards over the window. Each twist and knot was a vow. No harm would enter this hearth. Sam's fingers trembled, guilt shadowing his gaze. Holt's presence dredged the memory of his father's final gasp beneath sleet. Inside, Lila arranged kindling at the hearth's edge. Lanterns glowed in defiance's hush as Elias fetched a pitcher of water from the trough. He poured into tin cups and handed one to Sam. The boy's throat clenched. He sipped, warmth blooming in frost-raked chest. Elias watched Sam's jaw set, reluctant trust forging steel from grief. That afternoon, Elias led Sam and Lila into Ash Creek proper, shoals of drift crowding boardwalks. Elias needed supplies, flour, dried apples, extra snares. He knocked at the general store's door. Fresh snow drifted across painted sign. Inside, Mrs. Harrow unloaded sacks beside Amos Reed's ledger. Their eyes kindled relief. Elias laid bars of pemmican and spools of wire on the counter. "We brace for Holt's return," he said. He nodded to Reed. "He's here." A hush fell. Outside, hoofbeats rattled the saloon's planks. Holt rode to the front doors, cloak flaring, eyes cold as gunmetal. Sam froze beside Elias. Lila squeezed his hand, shawl draped and small. Holt dismounted with spurred click. "Name your price, Kane," he spat, voice like gravel. He socked pate of bread on the counter. "Turn the children over, or your cabin burns tonight." Elias stayed by Sam's side. "They're under my protection." "No, deal." His tone was steel ring hammered in the forge. Holt's lip curled. He bent toward Sam. "Your parents ran us out of town with lies. Now you pay." Sam's heart thudded guilt. His father's exposure of Holt's land scam was public justice, now twisted into crime for the boy and his sister. Sam's small hand drifted to his knife's grip. Holt's gaze snapped from Elias to the boy. "You cut me," he hissed. "I'll carve you a lesson." Elias stepped between Holt and the children. "Justice isn't yours to meet," he said. Holt raised his hand. The crowd lay silent beneath Winter's grip. Mrs. Harrow and Reed edged forward. "Judge Callahan will hear this tomorrow," Reed said, voice steady as Bible spine. "No more threats." Holt spat on the floor. He turned on his heel and strode outside, spurs ringing on thawing boards. His men trailed behind, rifles slung like verdicts. Holt paused at the hitching rail and carved the fence-cross sign, "Return by dark," into splintered wood. Then he remounted and galloped away, hoofbeats echoing like broken promises in Sam's chest. Elias gathered Sam and Lila by the sled-drifted trough. He knelt and pressed his palm to Sam's shoulder. "They'll strike tonight," he said. Sam's eyes held guilt's ember. Elias reached into his pack and pulled a length of stout rope. "We bore the barn windows. Secure the fence." He handed Sam the rope's end. No words passed. Each man's gaze spoke covenant defense. Lila nestled between them, shawl fluttering as wind buffeted their backs. She hummed a soft lullaby, her own promise of hope. By dusk, the barn's door was braced with crossbeams. All traps were checked beneath drifting snow. Elias stoked the hearth's embers to roaring flame. Lanterns swung in trembling glow. Sam and Lila sat on straw bales, each spoonful of stew a measure piece. But thunder of distant hoofbeats knifed through silence. Mrs. Harrow arrived at the door, footprints tracked in the hearth. She offered flour and fresh pine bark tea. Reed followed with Bible in hand. A dozen ranchers and miners stood behind them, each a silent sentinel. Elias nodded in gratitude. "Thank you," he said, voice low as ridge wind. Both parties understood. Community had heeded the call. Night deepened in lantern's embrace. Sam drifted asleep on Lila's pallet, knife sheathed on the table. Elias draped his coat across Sam's shoulders, his last refuge against nightmares. Lila cuddled the locket, initials scrawled in trembling brass. Reed recited a psalm. Mrs. Harrow tucked flour sacks against the door. Amos Reed's lantern swung by the window, eyes vigilant on darkness. Before the embers died, hoofbeats returned, once again ringing on cabin walls. Elias rose and checked his colt. Outside, Holt's men emerged from Pine's Edge, rifles leveled at the valley's breath. Sam woke, shivering, and staggered his feet. Elias knelt and wrapped his arms around the boy. He kissed Sam's forehead, breath warm against cold terror. "We stand together," he murmured. Holt's men fired once. Rifles' crack echoed off timber. Sparks flew from lanterns. An upper beam shuddered. Elias urged Reed and miners toward the door, each raising rifle or pick. Sam trembled, knife at ready but tears in his lashes. Lila clutched a locket to her breast. Tiny hope against storm's claws. Elias raised his voice. "Stand fast." He flung open the door, shotgun leveled at Draven Holt, the trader's brother and lead gunman. Next to him, Gideon Holt sneered, pistols crossed at his waist. The men faltered beneath the community's stand. Mrs. Harrow and Reed stepped forward. Miners hoisted lanterns high. Holt's posse wavered as the cordon tightened. Draven Holt spat snow. "You can't hide behind friends," he snarled. He raised his Winchester. No trigger pulled. A hammer blow rang. Jeb Calloway's rifle but met Draven's cheek. Draven staggered, rifle clattering to snow. Elias dropped to his knee. Colt leveled at Gideon. Lila wailed beneath blankets. Sam screamed and ran to his sister's side. Elias scooped them both into his arms and stepped back into cabin's warmth, defying Storm's final onslaught. Holt's men slunk into drift and dark. Hoofbeats receded like broken threats. The silence that followed rang louder than any gunshot. Inside, Elias laid Sam and Lila on their pallet, blanket tucked tight. He pressed a locket into Sam's palm and kissed the boy's brow. "Your parents would be proud," he whispered. Sam's tears fell silent, each drop a step toward forgiveness. Lila pressed the locket's brass to her heart and hummed her lullaby, strength born in trembling voice. Reed and Mrs. Harrow cleared embers and mended splintered beams. Miners reset traps beyond the porch. Each act was community's vow. No child would stand alone again. Elias watched their silent communion. Grief and hope entwined in lanterns' glow. At midnight, a final hoofbeat echoed on the ridge, distant but certain. Elias closed the shutters and barred the door. He knelt beside Sam and Lila, drawing blankets around them like a father's embrace. No words were needed. Each breath was promise and peace. The locket's glint winked from Sam's palm, proof of memory's enduring light. Outside, pines bowed beneath storm's hush. In the cabin's hearth-lit warmth, chosen family held fast. In the hush before dawn's reckoning, the valley exhaled. Tomorrow would test Silver's claim in Silverton's court, but tonight they stood together, blades set aside, trust forged in shared fire, and only unity could carry them through Part 4's final stand. Hoofbeats thundered through Ash Creek's dusk. Gideon Holt's wrath carving the valley's heart. Lanterns glowed in defiance's hush as Elias Kane and his allies braced the cabin's frontier walls. Boards were nailed across frost-split windows. Cedar planks lashed with rawhide straps. Snow-crusted barricades rose like tombstones against night's siege. Elias tested his Winchester's lock beneath falling ash, spurs clicking in measured cadence. Inside, Sam Whitaker loaded snares by the hearth's dying glow. He fingered the knife at his belt, his vow to protect Lila forged in cold steel and grief's memory. Lila pressed a locket to her heart, shawl drawn close. Elias crossed and placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. No words, only the promise of his silent strength. Martha Cole ferried oil for lanterns. Amos Reed lined pewter cups with pine bark tea. Jeb Calloway and miners hefted rifles and pickaxes as men turned tools into shields. Each face held loss. Miller's shoulder bandaged from Holt's first volley. The cabin exhaled in ember light. Fragile sanctuary against winter's terror. Dusk deepened to black. Holt's men emerged from pines like ghosts of greed, rifles leveled through slatted boards. They fired once. Rifles crack, fracture the night. Sparks shower on the barn's edge. Flames licked timber until inferno swallowed beams. Smoke coiled toward moon. Elias fired back. Colt barked, echo chasing echo across the valley's ridge. Sam crouched by Lila's pallet, knife unsheathed but trembling. A bullet whined past. The cabin's beam splintered. Elias dashed between door and hearth. Rifle leveled at picket post. "Hold fast," he murmured. Sam's eyes flicked to Lila, shawl trembling. He rose and pressed the knife, but into the floor as though anchoring hope, chest heaving with terror and defiance. Outside, fires burned ragged souvenirs of Holt's rage. Jeb Calloway and miners formed a ring around the barn, hanging lanterns on resistant rails. They smashed through charred doors and doused embers with buckets of snow. Mrs. Cole laid flour sacks at every entrance. Reed offered blessing in whisper. Elias returned to Sam and Lila. He knelt and draped the children in his coat now heavy with battle scent. Sam pressed a locket's chain to his lips, each loop a brass seal binding land and legacy. Elias brushed the locket's edge with thumb. Inside, a map fragment showed the Whitaker's true boundary carved by Amos Reed. Holt's deception lay exposed in ink and paper. The night wore on in volley and vow. Holt's men battered barricades. Miners charged sharpened picks through splits. Reed and Mrs. Cole guided Lila to the far corner. Each step a child's and against siege. Sam moved beside her, knife held high as lantern light glowed in his eyes. He placed himself between Lila and the worst of the fusillade, each breath a measure of courage beyond his years. Elias stood on the porch, Colt leveled at Holt's brother, Draven. Draven's dark cloak billowed in the wind. His rifle's muzzle glinted like regret. Elias fired. A round struck Draven's arm, sending him staggering back. Blood darkened his sleeve as he gripped the wound. Draven spat curses and slipped in the pines, hoofbeats fading like shattered pride. Dawn's first pale finger brushed frozen ground. Holt's men, battered by fire and truth, melted into snow-laced pines. Elias lowered his Colt and stepped into Dawn's hush. Sam exhaled, knife lowered but held. A token of broken fear reshaped his valor. Lila's shawl drooped as she stepped to Elias's side, lifting her locket for the rising sun. A knock rattled the door. Elias opened to reveal a rider bearing parchment sealed with Silverton's crest. "Court tomorrow at sunrise." Martha Cole stepped forward, handing Elias a purse of coins, and Jeb Calloway pressed a vial of tincture into his palm. "They confirmed the hearing," she said, voice steady as trials promise. Reed nodded, clasping his Bible. "We ride with you," he said. Elias tucked the parchment into his vest. He gathered Sam and Lila in his arms, blanket draped across their shoulders like refuge. Each heartbeat glowed in embers of victory and dawn's fragile light. Neighbors emerged from their cabins, ranchers hauling beams, miners carrying nails and lanterns. The barn's charred skeleton was trussed for rebuilding, fences mended with fresh rails. Each swing of hammer and torches glow-wove community's pledge beneath winter's thaw. Elias guided Sam to porch edge. He knelt and removed the locket from Sam's neck, opening it for all to see the surveyor's ink seal and map fragment. Sam's small fingers trembled as he pressed the brass to his chest. Courage cast in copper and memory's hold. Reed and Mrs. Cole stood behind Elias. Jeb Calloway held Sam's hand. Miners nodded in solidarity. Elias laid his hand atop Sam's. No words, only the hush of Dawn's promise. They would face Holt's final challenge in Silverton's court together. Hoofbeats thrummed again, faint at first, then swelling into vow. Holt's silhouette paused on a ridge, pistol drawn, and spurred in promise of more bloodshed. He glared at the cabin's door, fury and defeat mingled in frost breath. Then he vanished into winter's wind, leaving only hoofprints etched in thawing snow. Elias exhaled, chest heavy with storm's calm. He rose and swept a hand across the rebuilt corral, each plank a verse in community song. Sam pressed a locket into Elias's palm. Lila nestled behind his coat. Elias draped a blanket across their shoulders, coat and blanket woven into family's fabric. Before the valley's hush could settle, a runner emerged from pines, a deputy with another summons. Holt filed a final appeal. Court reconvenes at dawn's second light. His eyes were grave beneath hooded brim. Elias folded the note and pressed his free hand to Sam's head. "One more stand," he whispered. Sam's gaze met Elias's, small courage shining in frost-raked eyes. Lila tucked her locket beneath her shawl, each fold a mother's prayer. The barn lanterns flickered like captured stars. The cabin exhaled its shelter, embers crackling in hearth and heart. Elias closed the shutters against winter's final judgment and bolted the door. He gathered Sam and Lila by the stove, blanket draped heavy across their shoulders. Each touch was silent comfort, nonverbal vow that no harm could breach the promise within. Outside, hoofbeats thundered on ridge's crest, Gideon Holt's last silhouette etched against dawn's pale sky. In the hush before the valley's second reckoning, the cabin exhaled. Tomorrow's court would seal their chosen family's fate, and only unity born of shared fire could carry them to Part 5's resolution. Dawn's pale light gilded Ash Creek's snow, the valley's heart awaiting Silverton's verdict. Elias Kane guided his mare up courthouse steps, Sam Whitaker clutching Lila's hand. Each breath a plume against the cold air. Lanterns glowed in timbered archways. Townsfolk gathered on frost-laced benches. Elias led the siblings inside, corralled by oak walls in the hush of judgment. Judge Callahan, fur-lined robes brushing stone, rapped his gavel. We reconvene on the appeal of Gideon Holt. His gaze drifted to Holt's empty chair. Next to Elias, Martha Cole and Amos Reed waited. Martha's satchel of signed affidavits, and Reed's Bible press-like witness. Jeb Calloway and miners filled benches behind them, pick handles and spurs gleaming in dawn's glow. Sam pressed Lila close. She nestled her locket against his coat. Inside, the map fragment and witness note were its promise. Sam lifted Lila onto his knee. She clasped the brass chain and peered at Elias, her anchor in storm. Holt limped in, draped in blood-stained cloak, Draven beside him. Holt's cane tapped across planks, each echo a threat. His eyes glowed with rancor. Elias steadied his breath. No Colt in sight, only quiet resolve. Holt's men flanked him, rifles strapped like gauntlets. Elias met Holt's gaze. Holt spat snow. "You think a locket scribble can cast me down?" he snarled. Elias offered no words, only the locket and Martha's affidavits. Amos Reed laid them before the bench. Thomas Whitaker's deed sworn by Martha Cole. Ezra's sermon log confirming Reed's survey. Sam rose, voice trembling but clear. My sister and I are owed the land our father gave us. Mr. Holt's deeds were forged. He placed Lila on the floor. Lila opened the locket and showed the court the note and map. Holt's lip curled, defeat's promise flashing in his veins. Judge Callahan pounded his gavel. Gideon Holt's appeal is dismissed. His deeds are void. He stamped the ruling. Holt's face blanched, Draven's jaw clenched. Holt lunged to the bench, pistol drawn. Elias sprang forward, Jeb's rifle but slammed Draven to the floor. Reed's Bible clattered as Holt's pistol spun from his grip, metal skittering across oak. Holt froze, chest heaving. Judge Callahan's gavel fell again. Contempt, attempted assault, fraud. You are remanded to county jail. Deputies seized Holt's arms. His glare seared Elias's shoulder before straps bound him. He stumbled from the hall. Spurs ringing retreat's promise. Outside, snow drifted like mercy. Elias led Sam and Lila to the corral where miners and ranchers waited. Lydia Miller, her arm in sling, trumpeted a pickaxe salute. Jeb tipped his hat. Reed blessed the fallen fence posts. Spade struck, crashed wood in laughter. The barn's beams rose anew, hearts hammering alongside hammers. Lila hugged Elias's leg and looked up, eyes bright as flint. "Pa!" she whispered. Elias knelt and brushed snow from her hair. He draped his coat across her small shoulders. His coat reshaped his father's loving embrace. Sam dropped to his knees and tied Lila's bootlace, chore taught by Elias. Trust sealed in silent gesture. That evening, the cabin glowed beneath lanterns and new boards. Stew simmered in iron pot. Pine-scented fire crackled in heart's embrace. Elias fetched 2 tin cups of pine bark tea, one for Sam, one for Lila. They sipped, warmth blooming in cold veins. He knelt and offered the locket back to Lila. She pressed it to his hand, then slipped it around his neck. Elias's heart thudded beneath cold wool. The locket's brass glowed in embers light. Memory and promise fused in metal and love. Weeks passed beneath thawing sun. Sagebrush pressed green against cabin's posts. Miners coaxed wildflowers through fence rows. Elias taught Sam to mend fences and coax calves to lick salt blocks. Sam taught Lila to carry water in tin pail. Each task a step toward healing. Lila hummed lullabies beneath morning stars. Sam's smile grew steady, no longer shadowed by fear. One dawn, Elias led the children to the ridged pasture where the first foal nickered. He lifted Sam to the mare's saddle, then Lila. Each child's eyes glowed with triumph and trust. Elias guided the mare across frost-etched earth, family riding toward tomorrow's promise. That night, by heart's crackling glow, Elias retrieved a silver band, plain circle glinting in firelight. He placed it on a carved hook above the mantel, initials EK etched beside SW and LK. Each loop of steel was covenant sealed in Dawn's vow. Lila pressed her cheek to Elias's chest, breathing lullaby of cedar and snow. Sam rested his head on the arm of Elias's chair. Knife now hung by the door, its edge dulled by trust. Elias closed his eyes and exhaled, heart unburdened by past loss. Ash Creek's night fell in Lantern's hush. The cabin exhaled its covenant. Laughter in Stew's aroma, footsteps across pine slab floor, lullaby hummed into straw pallet. Community's lights glowed on fence posts, each lantern a testament to chosen family, redemption's anthem rising beyond valley's rim. As snow fell like grace, Elias draped a blanket across the children's pallet. Trust groaned in sleep's soft exhale. He settled beside them, coat drawn across shoulders. Lila mumbled "Pa" in sleep. Sam's hand found Elias's in blanket's fold. Under Wyoming's boundless sky, the dawn's covenant glimmered in brass and bond. No longer orphans, but family forged in storm's crucible, redeemed in Locket's promise and fatherhood's final embrace.